at that time I got that she didn't want to be found, and so I shared that with the family and with the investigators who had put in hours, hundreds and hundreds of hours of flight time in a particular area in Sedona, Arizona.
Right, I'm familiar
And
with Sedona.
so they looked and looked and looked. Well, later on I found out that the reason that she didn't want to, because we worked the case again about a year later looking to see if there was any new energy that we could feel from it, was that she didn't want her father to find her, and her father was on every single one of the flights
Oh,
looking
wow.
for her.
Wow.
And a year later, so this is 2 years after she went missing, some hikers found her. And of course, by that time, there would be nothing that would be as traumatizing to see for a father. So then she could be found.
So
And
she was being protective of her father.
right, she didn't want
Oh,
him to
wow.
find her that way because she was, she'd been in a plane crash.
Yeah.
The plane had been on fire. It was down in a very deep area that really you could barely even get to walk. And in an area that was very close to where I think 25 of the psychics out of 95 had within a mile radius of that particular area, but it was so difficult to find, and you couldn't see the plane from the air. And we all said that. We all knew you couldn't see the plane from the air, but we're trying to do our job and trying to help them locate her also, with her not helping.
Throwing blocks up for you.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, we see this. There's what's a show on cable? I think it's Psychic Detectives.
Yeah.
Well, and they kind of give you the idea that that it's accepted, but how do the police departments really take to the psychic aspect of all this? Are they receptive?
It's challenging because
Yeah.
we don't always know. Some police departments, we've had some that have just been open armed, like, here, we've got this case, we don't know what to do. They come to us right away, and then we get some more activity because we get it right away. Most of the people that come to us come a year and a half, 2 years, 20 years later. But once we turn in our police report and we hand it off to the police department, it's really out of our hands. So we don't always know if they followed up on the
Right.
leads that we gave, and until or unless the body's found. So I will say that I definitely think the energy's changing, and I think that there is more openness with it. But there are certainly some that are going to be closed-minded to it, and I'm skeptical. And that doesn't really bother me. I don't care if they're skeptical. I just
Sure.
say, what, be skeptical, but give us the opportunity. If you don't have any leads anyway, then who cares? What's it going to hurt you?
Sure. Why not? Why not check it out? Hey, by the way, have you met any psychic detectives?
Well,
They
we
must
have
be pretty intuitive if they're really good, I would think.
well, we have one gal that's in our group that is psychic, and she's also a private investigator.
Uh huh.
And so, yeah, that's like the perfect combination. And the thing that I find interesting with her is, for me, it's challenging to think like a cop. It's not my nature.
Right.
I'm much more
Absolutely.
sensitive and quiet and gentle, and well, not quiet, but gentle. And
Yeah, I wouldn't say you were quiet.
no,
Sonny,
not quiet.
no.
And then and for her, she's got the psychic aspect, and then she's got the investigative part that's looking for all that. So
Right.
that's fascinating.
That's got to be quite a combination. She must be pretty interesting just to be around, I would
It
suspect.
is. She's really dynamic, and she gets the hit, and then she knows how to follow it.
So the book itself is it on your website?
Yeah, it is.
What give our audience that website, and
The
Tom will put it
website's
up in
my
the chat.
name, so SunnyDawnJohnston with a
Dot
T.com.
com.
And the book is called Find Me, and it is really kind of a how-to book. So there's 13 of us that wrote several different chapters in the book on the different ways that we use our gifts to be able to work the cases. So there's a remote viewer, there's a forensic astrologer, there's using pendulums and cards and meditation. And so it gives a variety of different ways that really, for a lot of people, they find fascinating as to how it works. And, we're just all everyday people. And I think a lot of times people think, you have to have these special gifts. Well, everyone has a special gift. It's just that they've forced us to become more aware of them because they're always in front of our face.
Yeah.
Or we've chosen to nurture them and to support them and to allow them to grow. But we're all just everyday people like everyone else. So I think that book gives a lot of opportunity for people to 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 develop some of their own natural gifts.
So, by the way, I wanted to let our audience know that that you have a really a lot of videos up on YouTube on your YouTube channel that are will be especially helpful for folks. So they ought to do it. They definitely want to do a search for you on YouTube. If you have any questions for Sonny, Tom will take them either by phone uh, and or and he's going to put that in the phone number in the chat room, or you can throw the question into the chat room and we'll sure pose the question to Sonny. Uh, Sonny, let's go back to the mediumship for just a little bit and tell us what that. I mean, there's so many. When you talk about mediumship, are we talking about channeling, or because they're kind of like various aspects of mediumship, aren't there?
Well, there are. For me, I do a little bit of all of it. So there are times when it is just direct channeling. I'm getting direct messages right from spirit, and they're telling me specific, information, specific things. Other times, it's more impressioned in my mind.
Yes.
There's other times where I feel it. A lot of times when I do mediumship, I feel the way that the people passed in my body. Um,
Really?
and that's actually what was so challenging for me as a younger person is I've always felt people's emotions, people's pain,
Yeah, me too.
physical pain as well. And
Right.
so it was scary for me when I first started having that happen because I didn't want to feel everybody's pain, and I didn't know how to separate from it and how to be able to observe it. And through many years of trial and error and experience, I've really found a way that there are times when absolutely I still feel the energy and I still feel the pressure. I'll feel the way someone passed, but it doesn't stay with me. It's almost like it's just a validation so that I can share it with the person, with the client, and then as soon as I acknowledge it, then it releases out of my body, and I don't feel it as pain. So, like I just saw a gal last week whose son had been murdered, and immediately I felt pressure in the back of my head and pressure in my chest, and he was shot in both of those places.
Wow.
And I even grabbed, both places at the same time, and she was shocked, and she said, "Well, are you okay? Are you in pain?" I didn't feel pain, but I feel the pressure, and it's
Right.
very noticeable, but not uncomfortable, so to speak.
So
But if I carried it, it would be uncomfortable.
So do you channel an entity? There are a lot of people out there who channel entities, or do you? I mean, you're not following a single entity.
No, I I'll channel whoever it is that
Right.
The person wants to connect with, and or whoever comes through. But I don't have a particular, like Esther Hicks that channels just Abraham. And,
Right.
No, I don't do that. I've done some channeling at times similar to that. I'm not real comfortable with giving complete control of my body away.
I just totally understand that.
I've tried it a few times, and although I'm an ex-control freak, I still like to have a little more than that. So.
I'm glad to hear you're an ex-control freak.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, we're all controllers to a certain point. Are you familiar with J.Z. Knight and Ramtha?
I'm slightly familiar, a little bit. I've seen some interviews and one of those shows with her.
Well, actually, J.Z. Knight was the force behind The Secret.
Oh, okay.
She's the one who brought the documentary out and so forth.
Okay.
But I back, and this must have been like '85 or '86, and Ramtha was pretty popular, and I was living in San Diego, and I was dating a woman who had a church and was a pastor of a metaphysical church, and she was real into it. And I listened to it and went to a lot of the videos that they were showing, and it was really, really impressive until one evening I was watching the video, and Ramtha said that his main purpose was to become more famous than the most famous rock star.
Oh.
And that was like, what I heard was ego, and which to me is the opposite of a spiritual path. And I just kind of dropped that whole thing at that point.
Right.
That that's really one of the other things that I have a bit of a problem with. When you hear Esther Hicks stuff, you know the information is so it's all good stuff, but you just never know, you know, like what entity you're really involved with.
Well, I guess the way that I look at all of these kind of teachings is I take what resonates with me and what feels good to me, what feels like it's in alignment for me at that particular time in my life, and then the rest of it I release. And there's times where, you know, I've listened to something and I've been. I mean, I remember when I read, you know, You Can Heal Your Life when I was 19 years old, and in that book, Louise Hay said, "You pick your parents." And I'm like, hell no.
No, no way
You
I
know,
picked these
there's no
people.
way.
Yeah.
And then, you know, 2 years later, after, you know, I have this son and he's growing up, and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, that is true. So, you know, as we grow and evolve, things that maybe we come into contact with at one time don't feel in alignment for us, and as our vibration changes, then we do change. So I always take the information that feels good to me. It feels, and not necessarily always feels good, but it just feels in alignment as truth for me. And I know, I really believe within myself that I know my truth. And my head might talk me out of it sometimes, but I really know that within my heart.
That's exactly how I've approached this whole thing, and the reality is, like you said, it at some point I couldn't, you know, I couldn't take it in, but somewhere later I was able to. But that brings to mind the particular